14.3 The Most Beautiful One. My full brother cousin and a friend of mine as well, whom, after I went to the north, I was missing so badly, was heavily involved in this story. He was pretty much part of my life back then. So, I'm going to start this chapter with him. You may even be surprised how much of this chapter I had spent on him here. You'll see and understand that the story was about our life, my youth, about those who had just started working through their lives. Their lives coincided first with the acceleration and then with more famous perestroika periods in the country no longer exists. Remembering my cousin, the one who is my Aunt Raya's son, I was about to give him a call and then change my mind. We hardly talk to each other now, except those rare congratulatory texts exchanged at holidays. What do I tell him? Most likely at the end of the week he is probably drunk again and will not remember anything about our conversation. Besides, it was me who always called him. He never gave me any calls. You have seen already that not everything in my personal life went very well, but compared to him, my life was a success. Our paths parted long time ago. We are thousands of kilometers away and about 40 years apart since I left him. Not that we are at odds, we have never been, but not many things from our friendship glory days are left either. But it was there, and it was a real friendship. We were more than brothers, we were friends. We were more than friends, we were brothers. Ruslan, I'll call him this in tune with his real name. I have never asked his permission to write about him, so I have no right to write his real name as well. Came into my life unexpectedly. Of course, I knew of his existence as he knew about mine, but we were so far apart and not talking. But when he came from Central Asia to study in our region, and it became clear that before the school he was going to stay in our place. I wasn't thrilled by that, but accepted it, especially as I soon went to a military training camp. First, I was in the mountains around Tiberda, and then we went to the sea in Sukhumi. So, for the time being, I forgot all about him. When I returned, I wasn't socializing much with him. He didn't read the books, was not a rough kid either, so what should I talk about with him? He never responded to my impromptu sparrings and fights. How can one live without all this? He looked boring to me, and what really was annoying in him, he kept slouching all the time. And when I went somewhere, even to a grocery store nearby to buy some bread, he'd always catch up with me. There was no way to shut myself away from him for a while. I, by the way, have even been shy of his bright oriental appearances. He had inherited from his father an Uzbek, and for a long while I kept him away from my friends. Several times we went with him to visit his older sisters, who lived in the nearby town of Petrogorsk. We also went together to a lake to swim where he turned out to be not a swimmer. The Tian Shan mountain rivers are not particularly good places for swimming. But he started working on fixing it, and he began to catch up quickly with some of my little help. He turned out to be a fan of rock climbing. I wasn't surprised, considering where he was from. We had climbed our surrounding mountains, which, of course, were far from the Tian Shan, as he had always said. He missed his native place at first. The day before September 1st, one of his sisters came to take him to Kursavka, a county town beyond the Mineralnye Vody, mineral waters, to join the machine operator vocational training school. And when they left, I felt lonely and sad. I realized that I, in fact, had gotten attached to my cousin brother. I was so glad to see him back on his first weekend. I had never expected him to come back that soon. And since then, the coming weekends also meant to me that Ruslan would be coming for the weekend too. Each one of us had news piling up we excitedly shared, so I would be aware of his new friends, a sea of minds. Neither we nor our relatives lived lavishly, so he never went back to Asia to visit his family. So he spent his holidays with us instead, and thus has become a full member of our family. I had no idea now how could I do without such a friend like him before. We both loved taking and printing photos. I would tell my brother the beloved sci-fi Professor Dial's head story, or something funny from the recreational physics, or about the clouded leopard's habitat, and he would listen to all these displaying great curiosity. And he would enthusiastically share with me the principle of an internal combustion engine, or about how he would operate a huge excavator, earn big money, and buy a Lada 6 car. That was a cool, modified Fiat 124 car at a time in the USSR. Only the Volga was even cooler a car. Over time, Ruslan took over the best friend of mine status, surpassing all my existing friends he had met. A few years later, his mother, Aunt Raya, arrived with Ruslan's younger brother. His younger brother, Roman, was handsome, almost with the Scandinavian appearance, a boy no resemblance to Ruslan at all. Then Ruslan graduated from his vocational school, found himself a job, got wound up with some money, and now he was dressing up better than me. Even before that, he kinda tried to become the sort of my big brother, the leader, that is. The fact that he was a year older than me didn't stop our relationship to be equal before then. And some healthy as yet competition has touched our otherwise disinterested friendship. We still would encourage and praise each other's bulging biceps and our stomachs raised strips. However, I noticed that the girls were getting a kick out of him, not me. Although Ruslan, as the saying goes, wasn't any good at carrying himself on. He had never danced at discos, just slow dances with girls, but there was always some local beauty who would invite him to ladies' dance. "Am I so good?" he would exclaim, happily fooling around. And I used to be shy to take him out. What the hell was I thinking? He was a handsome guy with incredible dense blue, black, and slightly wavy hair, a stout body with no longer stooping his shoulders, with his tight blue jeans, albeit a little bit too jammed but still neat on him, a gift from his Korean friend, along with the Adidas t-shirt from Taiwan, sent him by his cousin the Submariner. That's the way I remembered him before the army, looking good and dressed to be teeth too. No wonder girls liked him. He had broken his cherry before me, and it did hurt me the most. I remember that. All of a sudden, people around began to notice that Ruslan looked pretty much like Talgat Nigmatul in The Rising Star, the USSR version of Bruce Lee then, who played Saleh, the chief of the pirate in Pirates of the 20th Century movie. You could Google it. All these movies are on YouTube now. I was quickly going into his shadows, while Ruslan was becoming more self-confident. Girl just kept running into him, no matter how painful it was for me to see my brother's success. I would never show it. I apparently even enjoyed it. He was still my brother, after all. After I finished high school, my parents were able to find some money for me and my sister, who was a student in Leningrad on her vacation, to go to our grandmother's village, where I hadn't been since I was 5 years old. Man, it was fantastic out there. My sis had become an object of universal worship and adoration, and my grandmother strictly required me to guard her, fearing that she could get kidnapped. I was having a good time out there too. For all that I was missing in the south, I quickly made up out there in the countryside. They would fall in love with me and were willing to go on a date with me. I hated to leave that place, and how much I enjoyed telling Ruslan later about the village girls, making clear that I was all cool out there in my small historical motherland. He was drafted into the Red Army a few months before me. Neither of us had thrown a party on those occasions. We had no money for that. 2 years later, he entered his civil life a couple of months earlier than me, and I was envying him, reading his letters from his civil street. Then we were together again, and free too. It was the beginning of summer 1985. Everything seemed to be good and beautiful. All friends, Italian pop music everywhere, the Rubik Cube, the Soviet youth TV shows. They just kept talking about the International Student Festival against imperialism going on in this country. Those peace marches. No one seriously believed in this crap any longer, but still kept playing. The future oligarchs were then the Komsomol leaders, those very enthusiastic who irritated me. Probably they were just smarter than me and they knew what they were doing. My brother and I had noticed that the girls passing us by would often look at us after, making each of us proud and think that it was you they were looking at. This was for the first time in life I was able to dress up fashionably. While I served my country, my parents saved some money for me to pay for my clothes and my trips to visit my sister in Leningrad and then passing by Moscow to my grandma's village again. It was incredible. I liked it there even better than the first time. While I was in the village, a friend of my sister, Ida, I wrote about in the previous chapter, an infatuating romantic girl with adventurous inclinations, came along with her to my parents' home and scared both of my parents to death with her intention to marry me. But, not finding me there, she must have gotten bored and out of the boredom a couple of times slept with Ruslan. The only right thing she did then was that, before leaving our place, she had said to Ruslan that I was much better in sex. Ruslan had told me later that himself, and that assessment of a young girl, of course, had hurt him big time. Now, as I recalling all this, I think that her phrase had ended his, unquestionable before, superiority over me. Before the army, our sportsmanship was pretty much at par with mixed success. In arm wrestling, for example, I didn't beat him every time, and there was time when he constantly pinched me. After the army, however, I had more pronounced fitness success over him. I had both better lift and press performance, and now I also readily agreed with his flattering remarks on my athletically built body and deliberately held back with my courtesy response I owed him. And I would have said before, like, "And you have better black lead spread, and besides, girls like you, not me." Over time, the mutual flattery has turned to pulling a stunt on each other. But, true, we always knew where to stop and we'd never crossed our red lines of direct insults. I couldn't afford that. I mean, I didn't have too many close friends to fight with. And there was an Achilles heel Ruslan had. He couldn't handle women. I mean, he only twice fell in love, both unanswered, and both of his love objects, here we go again, were friends of my sister. I mean, he only twice fell in love, both unanswered, and both of his love objects, here we go again, were friends of my sister. Some mystery. He wrote a love letter to his first one who lived in our neighborhood and then was hiding from her. He was so much in love with her that he ignored, he just refused to see the other girls who were in love with him. With the second one, they said, I wasn't there around. I was up in the north by that time. He was constantly seeking her love, carrying her terrible moods, and at times being humiliated, and finally had convinced her to marry him. And so they lived till she died of lung cancer. It was an odd couple, I'd say. Anyway, after the army, he still was my best friend. We had a lot in common. We both liked taking pictures and printing photos at nights and even days, having our pictures look professional. And we, from time to time, started to make some money on that. Our passion for photography finally started to pay the rent. Ruslan bought him some good Soviet Zenit SLR camera, a speedlight, and one of the best photographic enlargers we had in the USSR. He also got himself dressed up from head to toe. He always knew how to dress up and enjoyed it. I spent all my money on music I loved. I was buying hi-fi stereos and LPs. That kind of hobby used to be very expensive compared to our salaries. After the army, I confidently stepped out of my cousin's shadows and at times picked out these beauties to make even Ruslan envy. Occasionally, I had to fight, like in the old days, for girl this time. I still had a shot in the locker. It was back in 1989 I had my last major fistfight. First, I felt it was no longer necessary. The second, I hit one of the attackers and got him to the hospital where he stayed for a while, and I made a decision. Enough was enough. I was coming to maturity. In the summertime, I probably was getting good. My skin was getting tanned, although it wasn't that easy for me. The fair skin body. I had to roast in the sun a lot for that. And my hair color faded to white. It was much easier to hook up girls, no matter if they were the locals or the summer visitors at discos. Despite all this, however, I still could not reverse the trend. The girls were still more attracted to Ruslan. Well, there still must have been something in his exotic appearance. And he was openly proud of that, and he never missed a chance to tease me with that. My admiring stories about the village and my adventures aroused my cousin's interest and even, it seemed, at times distrust. In a month, 3 chicks, in a village? You don't believe me, do you? I was getting excited. Come with me next vacation and you'll see it. So we made decision. We take a vacation the following summer in 1987 and go to my village. That village, by the way, was his historical homeland too, despite the fact he had never been there. We worked in the same road construction machinery shop, I must say, both as excavator operators. The hardest thing was to get them to let us go together on vacation. And here we go. All coffee was behind us. We managed to get ourselves some vodka, which was a scarce delicacy by then. We drank really at the time, I should say, but what the hell, we were going on vacation. We packed up a few cameras, a lot of films and some photo papers. Foolishly, we also took the enlarger. We thought we'd shake the money tree there too. Some gifts and presents for our relatives. I even rented a portable tape recorder for the vacation. We were going to have a really good time out there. I had incredibly good anticipation of this vacation, and sure enough, it lived up to my promises. And we hit the road. I'd say that my anticipations were mingled with some questions. What was I thinking taking Ruslan with me? Hadn't I jumped the gun on that? He'd always been my dangerous rival after all. All this. My stories apparently must have caused Ruslan's high expectations. What if they are not met? In the year 1986, for example, it didn't go very well for me there. That would be an excuse for him to make fun of me. Where the hell are they, those girls of yours, huh? The flight from the Caucasus to the Ural went well. We stayed overnight in Ufa with my aunt, and the next day we got off to the village with her 9-year-old son Ed. A few stops before ours in the village, few girls stormed in the bus, and I saw Rose, the girl I was dating once. I turned my back to her, and facing up my brother, I called his attention to her. Here we go. We've got one already. He nodded. She was all right to him. You have no fucking idea. She was hot, but I was getting tired of her back then. I was sure my brother would get well settled and like it here. And I would find myself a good girl too. Just look at here how many young and beautiful ones we've got here on this bus only. My grandparents, of course, were happy to see us and pleased with the gifts we had brought to them. To our delight, they both looked healthy and vigorous. Just less livestock on their farm. They have sold them over. It was harder for them to run the farm. We quickly settled down and got a bite of lunch. After that, I took Ruslan to meet my next-door friends. Fortunately, we found my best childhood friend Daniel. We all called him Dan for short. With him, we went to celebrate the beginning of our first, and as it turned out, to be the last vacation with my brother. There was no alcohol allowed for sale in the village liquor store for the harvest time, so none was available there, and the locals drank mostly meat and less often moonshine. So we, with our bona fide vodka, sausages, and other appetizers laid on the newspaper spread on the ground, were more than welcomed, and we looked real respectable out there. We camped under the trees on the high bank of an unnamed creek, flowing to a larger but still unnavigable Doma River. After the first one to our vacation and the second one, which was both to locals and visitors, we smoked our cigarettes and I had that blissful feeling of our vacation beginning. Never mind that, as to Dan's stories, there was nothing special in the village now. It was boring, as he was saying. I still had a good feeling that the vacation would go as it should. It felt good. The now verging sun was caressing our faces, my rental recorder was playing back some nice music, and we enjoyed the beginning of both summer and our holidays. A few hours later, the two of us went to the local village club. I knew from my experience that the real fun started at night after the movies in the club ended. Especially at the weekends when a lot of students and young folks would come to visit their parents from nearby towns. My 9-year-old cousin Eddie asked me to take him to the local club for movies, but I said no. He was too young for that. But here came a friend of his, our family friend, a local daredevil who kept the whole neighborhood, if not the whole village, in check. To put a word for Eddie, I had to assent and let Eddie go there under his friend's responsibility. We agreed to meet at the club after the movie was over and I'd take Eddie back home. Ruslan and I came to the club right on time. The movie had just ended. The crowd was coming out of the cinema house and stayed, mingling and expecting for something to come out. Happy Edward ran up to us. I saw a girl separated from a group of girls and kind of ambling approach us. That was Rosa. She was so glowing with happiness and that horrid sparks in her eyes. "Hi," she whispered somewhat sensually to me, peeking at my eyes, and it was damn arousing. "Hi," I said, taken aback a bit. "This is Ruslan, my cousin. I saw you today in the bus, and blah, 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 blah." She nodded Ruslan curtly and came right back to me, looking straight into my eyes again. She certainly had made her mind on me for that night. We moved to the side. Radek, Eddie called me out. What are you going to? Whoring, blurted Rosa, happily fooling around. Ruslan grinned. I fucking her. I asked Ruslan to take Eddie home. I'll come back later. I came later, all right, much later, in the morning. I walked Rosa home and stayed with her in her summer kitchen for the night. I wearily trudged back in the early morning carrying my silent tape recorder as if it was a piece of wood. The country girls passing me by with hose in their hands and with brownish sunburned faces on their way to work curiously looked at me. My first day of the holiday has passed. Ruslan seemed to be in good mood. He came back with Eddie from the country club the night before, had some tea with him and went to bed. Just in case, I reassured my brother that we still had the entire vacation ahead of us. And we sure would knock ourselves out. That's for sure. Sure, you're knocking yourself out all right. He couldn't help it. I shrugged. True. Every dog has its day. Rosa, once coming into my life again, didn't even think of disappearing from it. So all the other girls were cut off from me now. I was mostly with her in the afternoons. There were no chances to miss her. Sometimes I wanted to be all alone. I saw that there were some beautiful girls I kept coming across with at the club. Especially, I remembered the one Ruslan drew my attention to. She was standing apart from the crowd in the pool room. She was so beautiful and sad, reminding me young Anastasia Kinski, the one I saw once in the movie Cat People. A young man approached her, they began to talk, and I immediately lost interest in her. I wasn't alone either. Well, why Rosa didn't go with Ruslan that night anyways? Strangely, it wasn't just Rosa who wouldn't go to Ruslan down there in the village. The first week of our holiday was about to pass by, and he still had not been hooked up by anybody. Not that I cared about it a lot, I was just curious. Why? Could it be because of the oriental appearance that had been helping him a lot in the south, that no longer seemed to be working here in Bashkortostan? Here we had a lot of guys like him. Here I'm going to talk off the point a little bit. The population of that village, being ethnically homogeneous, was quite a mixed gene pool. You could see, along with pronounced Mongoloid feature carriers, some European, almost Scandinavian ones. I remember I was surprised to see for the first time the red-haired and freckled folks in the village, as if it was somewhere around the city of Arkhangelsk, not in the middle of Bashkiria. This, I think, was an echo of two Finno-Ugric tribe Mongolization waves. The first one during the Great Migration period and the Hans invasion, and the second one 1,000 years later during the Action Mongol Hordes invasion. So, to some extent, I could say I am related to both Hungarians and Mongols with the Huns. The facts of strong Ugric blotches in our language, I am not a linguist by the way, which belongs to entirely different language family, pretty much favor this version. I even would say that the ethnic group which is now called the Kazan Tatars is in fact the Turkicized Ugric. They, the Kazan Tatars, are anthropologically very close to the Mari people. However, I'm not a historian either to claim the role of ultimate truth soul possessor. Well, getting back to the point. Meanwhile, Rosa had to leave me for a day or two to resolve some employment issues. I was free again. It was time to take advantage of these and help Ruslan to find him a girl. I couldn't help noticing, though, that when girls stopped piling up around him, he turned out to become somehow helpless. His self-confidence was melting away right in front of my eyes. It was Friday, and my granny sent us to buy some bread. That meant that we had to go to the center about 40 kilometers away. So we had to catch a bus at 7 a.m. and buck along for an hour and a half one way only on a terrible road. But despite the terrible road, I still slept on the bus's back seat. In the village, I was never getting enough of sleep, and the bus would depart the center for the village at noon. I remember that summer day heat and crowds at the filthy bus station, but still, it all felt cool. There were more people than usual in the bus on our way back. I mean, there were a lot of young, beautiful girls. We just had to go to the club that night. There were always a lot of people on weekends there at the disco staying up late, especially on New Year's Day in the end of June. The local village was overcrowded all right that night. My eyes were dazzled with awesome girls, and Ruslan was resolutely determined to win back his lost positions. I got carried away by a pretty blonde girl, Rita, I was dancing with now and then. "And where is a friend of yours?" she asked me during one of those dances. Here we go again. "A friend of mine?" "A friend of mine? Well, he's dancing." I nodded at them. "Who is she?" "Well, she's not a local." Rita didn't want to talk about her, and I did not want to dance anymore. "You have directly asked her how old she was?" With an undisguised sarcasm, I asked Ruslan, trying somehow to annoy him, and he noticed it and came right back at me. "Yes, I have directly asked her that." "How come you're not with her?" I softly changed the subject. It's better not to tease him now. "She's still dancing. I'm waiting for a slow dance and I'll get back to her." Well, well, I muttered sarcastically. It was very headlong of him to leave her all alone right then. Somebody might take her away. I'd never expect that just after half an hour I would be the one to take her away. Everything turned out somehow completely unexpected. We were approached by an old friend of mine who offered us a drink of the delicious meat he had brought along. I took a few sips and left them. I said I had to leave them and would be back soon. Ruslan, dancing with Ellie, had enough time to tell her that I had an audio cassette with cool, slow dancing music, the ballads recorded in it. That's how badly he wanted to dance with her. I learned it later from herself when I danced right next to her and talked. Ruslan forgot to mention that on the other side of the tape I had an AC/DC heavy metal band. I especially had it recorded for the occasions like these to dilute a little bit the modern talking disco rave, which was trendy at a time. And I told her about it. She brightened up at that. She turned out to be a heavy metal fan herself. She dug that kind of music. And she was so good. And she was a hell of a dancer too. And those eyes. And catching her glance, I knew already. I felt that no way I was going to give her away. No fucking way. And the other day I learned that my ex-husband got married before I got married. That's why she was dressed so mournfully. She was wearing a dark formal suit. That was the suit she wore that made her stand out among the rest here, and it was very flattering to her, the bright brunette. She was also wearing trendy coarse netted pantyhose, which also looked cool on her, along with her elegant black shoes. A large stylish chain with an attached screw steel plate with an engraved inscription on it was hanging around her neck, with identically looking chains around her wrists. I thought of her heavy metal rock fascination. I liked the hard music myself, but apparently not as much as she did. I didn't have that much of panoply on me, and I already wished I had. In the courtyard where we came in, I turned on the lamp and to the fence roof. At least we had some lighting. I brought my tape recorder out and some tapes with it, and a packed brand new blue jeans made and in India for Ellie to try it on. My sis gave it to me to push it around. I also picked up a bottle of vodka and glasses, sneaking for them separately not to clink, when passing by my sleeping grandparents. "That's to our meeting," I said to her silent, surprised look. "Haven't drank vodka for a while," replied she. "They drink mead here." Curious, Edward looked out from the window into the courtyard. Back to sleep, I growled back to him, and Edward immediately disappeared. With low-volume hard rock music playing, we sipped vodka without taking any snacks. We didn't have any, and talked. We talked about just-released cinema movies as well as semi-legal videotape ones. Talked about music. Ellie showed me some heavy metal moves and kicks. She was a superb dancer with a good sense of rhythm. I told her about my passion for English, about Ireland where the Black Sea is at hand, and about how I was going to earn money. A filthy lot of them. No, not that I had no money on me right then. No, I had plenty of it, but blah, blah, blah. There was no stopping, and as it was going for Ellie, it was much easier to get along with men rather than with women. That's why she had so few friends. And I learned from her that I had those cold Sylvester Stallone eyes. She liked cold eyes. Wow! The most beautiful woman in the village made me a flowery compliment. But I guess she probably overdid with my cold eyes. From then on now, I always exercise that cold look in front of mirrors before going out. I was probably overdoing with that either. Anyway, I helped her to try on the blue jeans I brought. Sure, she liked it. It was a perfect fit. Her mom would come soon and buy it. The blue jeans were not mine. I would have given them her for free. But at least I'd see her again. I'd see her anyway. She had asked to borrow my tape recorder for a day. She was missing good music. It was good that I, before going to the village, had all this music on tape. I even had the urge to kiss her, but I fought it back. It was too early. For the first night anyway. She was sitting right next to me, so beautiful. I couldn't believe that. Ellie proposed to stretch our legs. We grabbed the tape recorder and what was left of vodka in the bottle, and we went towards Ellie's house. We had just made our halfway through the village when Ruslan and our next-door boy showed out the darkness right in front of our faces. An awkward silence hung up in the air, and Ellie said it would be good to sit down on a bench we stopped by under the tree and finish our vodka. I barely heard Ruslan angrily saying to me under his breath that he was about to hang himself. We grimly finished our vodka. Our next-door boy was pissed off at something too. He said goodbye to us and left. Turned out that he had just a fist fight for his girlfriend at the club. Then we walked Ellie home, the three of us holding Ellie right between me and Ruslan with our arms around each other. We said goodbye, agreeing to meet the next afternoon at the club and then go to our place to celebrate Youth Day. I also told her it would be nice if Ellie brought along some friends of hers to keep Ruslan busy. The main thing for me was not to lose the initiative here. Ellie gave me a knowing toss. Okay, she got the message. Ruslan and I had a severe fight on our way back home. Ruslan kept accusing me of treacherously taking advantage of the situation. What situation? I was getting steamed up myself. If you wanted to keep her, you should have stayed with her all along, waiting for slow dances, huh? Had it not been me, somebody else would have done it to you. I don't care, he kept on going on me. You just have gotten off Rosa. I had nobody yet. I wished I had traded 10 roses for Ellie, but he'd never take them, not even hundreds. He was right about one thing though. I would never take any action on her had she not made any move on me, no matter if it was either him or somebody else. But Ruslan was not going to give her up that easy. He vowed to get back what belonged to him. I was carrying on like a winner, making clear that it was a done deal and she had chosen the one she wanted, telling him, not without some embellishment, how we just had a good time together, especially focusing on trying on the blue jeans. I was using the whole psychic attack arsenal I had against my opponent. The most important thing was not to suppress him and make him go with it. Back home, I kept acting like a very happy guy, and in a few minutes I was breathing evenly on the couch as if I was in a deep sleep. I was far from being calm and happy. I didn't know what I would have done in his shoes, but I sure wouldn't put up with this.
Here was another thing I knew for sure. Don't make any sudden movements, keep showing confidence and act as if Ellie was already mine and would remain mine. Ruslan kept fighting with me all the next day long. He even wouldn't help me with cutting the wood this time. He looked very malicious. After lunch I went to have some siesta in a hut a relative of my mother had built 2 years before, and which I had mostly been using for doing a knock with girls. Ruslan has upgraded the hut a little bit by putting lights and installing a fan so you, before going to sleep, could read or listen to music. Anyway, when I slept, Ruslan took his chance to take her back. So, I clutched up a bit but remained calm to him. Nothing. She wasn't home. I asked her neighbor girl to call Ellie out. I took a deep breath of relief. I finally woke up. Well, what a fast egg Ruslan in fact was. You shouldn't have done it, I said. Ellie has already made her choice. He seemed to have finally accepted it. My uncle, my mother's brother, has arrived with his son that day. They came from Uzbekistan. On my way to club that night, I almost got into a fight with a young man. He brazenly asked if we had any cigarettes on us while he had his pack sticking out of his pocket. Yes, we were strangers out there, but when somebody comes like that, he needs to be fixed right there at its very beginning. He had just picked on the wrong guy. We got it settled. He turned smart enough to apologize. Nice meeting you, man. The first thing was when we met again, Ellie asked who of us was looking for her that afternoon. I silently pointed to Ruslan. I had to meet another Radik that evening, Ellie's ex-boyfriend. They violently fight for girls in the village and I didn't want to ruin my very important date. Not that night anyway. But I wasn't going to back off either. And the guy was trying to scare me. Okay, don't get me wrong, he was saying. If I can't handle you on my own, I've got friends here, understood? No tilting matches here. He had made that clear all right. It was going to be a real monkey stomp. But I made it clear to Radik that I was not going to give Ellie that easy. Live or die. Besides, I wasn't all alone here. Just take Fail, the Alec Gazmanis, for example. Then later, inside our heart, Ellie was quizzing me about what were we talking about with Radik. About her, of course. He wanted me to stay away from her. That she, Ellie, had betrayed him and then there in the countryside nobody would date her. He, Radik, would see to it. He was feared by many there. They were seeing each other before Radik went to the army and then she had gotten married when she was 16. So I had to deal with yet another broken heart, which nearly ruined my holiday. By the way, there was Ellie's friend, a tall, good-looking girl wearing a red tracksuit but while I was squabbling at the club with another Radik, she had disappeared, so Ellie and Ruslan kept waiting for me without her. Ellie, as soon as she saw the two of us together, she immediately must have figured out what was going on. We had it out with my same name by making the deal. Since there is no stopping me from seeing her, he asked me to be at least not that open. in displaying our relationship and tried to keep it quiet. I told him I could not guarantee that, but I understood his situation. I would try not to directly infringe on his dignity. So we both managed to save our faces, and later I often saw him in the club, always drunk.
As a result of that meeting, we were, the three of us, in our hut without Ali's friend. So I had to watch Ruslan. He was still my rival. Albeit lost but not completely surrendered to me yet. Ali, in front of Ruslan now, had mentioned my cold eyes again. She was so pretty in her expensive blue tracksuit. I had a plan for her for that very night. I had to finally dot the I. Anyway, it was great to drink a bottle for three. We finished one bottle of vodka and decided to keep another one. We talked a lot about heavy metal music. It was me who did most of the talking with Ali. Ali once or twice mentioned it was running late. I had to do something. Several times I kissed Ali and she responded vigorously. Ruslan didn't seem to get the message. He wasn't going to leave. He was going to ruin my plans instead. How many times do I have to deal with hurdles? Ruslan, take this empty bottle out, would you please? We both with Ali expectantly glared at him. After an endless pause, Ruslan took the bottle and, so reluctantly, he left us. I turned off the light. Ruslan told me later that when he was leaving us ready to kill himself, he heard my Ali saying, "Now it's all obvious to him." "Sure it is," I replied. "It's about time for him to figure." I swear I do not remember this dialogue. I'm taking Ruslan's word for it. ... We drank a lot of water. I mean, I hadn't drank so much water even during the hot hair harvesting time. We exhausted fell asleep in the morning when the darkness started breaking away. Ali, it turned out, saw us almost from the very first day in this village. She had seen me with Rosa around, who will no longer dare to approach me. Wow. My grandmother's unexpected and loud knocking on the door woke me up and had me jump to my feet. Thank God the door was latched on. Shit. I completely forgot I was to go to the center to buy some bread. But what about Ali? I looked at her. Gosh, she was so good. Naked, she was still sleeping, despite my grandma's bang at the door, like a child. Grandma left us alone, and I kept feasting my eyes on Ali. Couldn't help stroking her breasts, and she, still sleeping, stretched out toward me like a cat. Fucking district center. I went inside the house, woke Ruslan up, and explained to him the situation. I was to go to the center, and Ali was still in the hut sleeping. I would appreciate it if he made sure that nobody disturbed her. Ruslan, pissed off, went out to wash his face. I was late for the bus. Well and good. So I went back to my Ali in the hut again. She still was sleeping, now all dressed up though. Couldn't help admiring her, and she opened her eyes. My husband used to look at me when I was sleeping too, she smiled. I brought her some soap and a towel. I was being a little nervous when Ali was washing up. What was I going to tell my grandma had she shown up? However, I had enough self-possession not to show my anxiety. I ferped Ali home. She was flustered by the collective farm women passing her by to work. They sure understand everything. Never mind, we go to work like everybody else. Right. We sure like it, she said, smiling. To tell the truth, I wasn't sure how did I look, but Ali looked tired and still beautiful. And happy too, and I kept admiring her furtively. What a woman. She looked gorgeous in her tracksuit in the shape of Natasha Varley in Abduction in the Caucasus popular movie in the USSR. Only she was better. We agreed to meet at 2 p.m. at the village bridge and go to the river to swim.
Should take her son along, otherwise they may not let her go. My Uncle Reeve, since he arrived, constantly kept both of us busy, and he, along with his teenage son, was always busy repairing, fixing, and painting something. Still, we made the time for our businesses. At 2 p.m. straight we were on that bridge. Someone has whistled to us at a distance. That was Ellie, all right. Hell of a girl. And she whistled. I never learned how to whistle. This time she wore a light summer dress and was holding her 3-year-old story boy. Off we went. On the Dama River shore, we chose a nice place under a big tree shade. We took the tape recorder and our cameras along. By the way, I never was able to pass those taking pictures to Ellie. I'll get later to that. On our way to Dama River, Ellie told us that when she was walking down the street on her way home from my place, she saw her ex-boyfriend Radik passing her by on the motorbike from the opposite direction with his screw-face look. He didn't even look at her. He must have figured out where you were back from. We laughed. She was good at swimming too. She turned out to be an athletics girl, the track and field. We were having fun, swimming, taking pictures, and just fooling around. Ruslan was slightly depressed, but he kept a stiff upper lip. And I couldn't help coming down to the compliments on her body shape. She flushed with happiness and eloquently expressed her regrets about me not having seen her in the swimsuits she had once. Her jealous ex-husband had torn them apart. And she flirtingly made that teasing belly dance movements. Oh, my beautiful. After swimming, we were lying on the grass under the tree listening to the music I brought and smoked cigarettes. She said that it was so good that she had met us in the village. She couldn't stand that village before, and now she even kinda liked it here. We were thirsty and we had no water with us there. Ellie just walked to the middle of a self-made bridge, squatted down, and drank up straight from the river. You will never get lost with a girl like this around. Ruslan and I did the same. Ruslan was spinning on a bar close by, Hassan digging in on the beach right next to Ruslan, finally leaving his mom alone. Ellie and I asked Ruslan to look after her sonny. We'd be right back. On our way back home, all tired and happy, Ellie was holding her son again, who had fallen asleep, and I quietly, not to wake him up, took him off her hands. Ellie was tired of carrying him all along. That was the only way to take him off her hand, otherwise he'd never go to my hands. We tried. After a while, I was surprised how Ellie could carry this weighty boy for so long. She was quite a healthy girl. Of course, I wasn't showing I was getting tired of carrying her boy. Ruslan later said that Ellie kept watching me all along as I was carrying her boy, somewhat measuring me. At the bridge, I kissed Ellie. I no longer cared about the locals' goodbye, saying her to wait there for me for the coming night. Okay, they will let me go. I was desperately in love with her and was desperately trying to hide it from her. I was sure now that if I had any power over her, it was only because she didn't know how badly I was in love with her. And she was, I figured, trying to please me to catch my attention. In part, I was acting this way because of her as well. It was her saying to me within once, and Ruslan heard that too, that along with my cold eyes, she also liked men who both looked and carried on like some sort of that Celentano, an Italian singer used to be very popular in USSR in the movies, a bit uncouth, who should be conquered. Apparently she was good at that. Even run after them. That's how, if you will, she had driven me into that image of what I was a prisoner now. Let her run about a little bit after me, and she did. And it felt fantastic to have such beauty running after me. I know it sounds cynical, but I couldn't help it. I just couldn't show any of my weaknesses before such a woman. And how did I berate myself for this after I knew I had lost her? Anyway, I and Ruslan, both relaxed back at home, were having some vodka that afternoon after swimming on the river. I gave a couple of shots to my uncle too to get him off our backs. We smoked the tasty and expensive cigarettes we could get in the USSR and kept talking about my Ellie. I was telling Ruslan how her little boy had accidentally given her a scrape on her gums, and she asked me to examine how badly it was scratched. Fortunately, it wasn't bad. And I had a chance to see her perfect and white teeth, whereon Ruslan had commented that, as it often happened, if a girl was beautiful, she was perfect all along the line. It's even unfair somehow, I'd say, he said. He too was always thinking about her. He too had fallen in love with her and didn't hide it. I put my hand on his shoulder. It's okay. I wanted to give him some encouragement as a token of gratitude for giving in her to me what probably was not possible to give voluntarily. The clouds kept gathering up above us. They started gathering as we were going back from the Dama River, and now it was quiet. It was a pre-storm sultry in the air, and the clouds were now rapidly turning dark. And we both were sitting outside smoking in a blissful happiness. Whenever you talk about her, kept on going Ruslan with his muffled and feeling voice. I often wished you had shut up, and at the same time I still wanted to talk about her. And you know what? I no longer want to meet anybody else here. I was silent. I felt sorry for him. A massive storm came out at that moment and smashed out our house's gate and fences. Ellie was not allowed to go to the club that night. She ran up to the club to tell me that and said she would be waiting for me at her place gate, and there we were all night long. She was wearing a white wind jacket. It was a bit cold that night after a short but violent storm. "Where the hell did you spring from, my beautiful?" It suddenly slipped out of my mouth. "Do you really like me that much?" She was smiling with her eyes with very long and thick natural eyelashes down. "I do," I whispered, kissing her eyes. That probably was once I said, "No, breathe this out," once forgetting about my damn cold eyes. The next day we planned to go to the Doma River again for swimming. No Ruslan this time, no her son either. Her cousin brother had just arrived. He would be babysitting him for her. He's a good guy and very protective too. You'll like him when you meet him. She never came at the appointed time, 1 p.m. I had prepared some food, water, and drinks this time. We were going to have some fun, and for a longer time. Waiting for her, I was busy fixing our broken gate and fences with my other relatives. Ellie came an hour later. Jess came running up to me to say that she was leaving me. She would have to go too far since her mother had just arrived. Her cousin brother showed up riding right behind her on a bike with her son sitting with him, and warmly greeted me as they passed us by. "Right now we are heading out to the next village." "What is it with you?" she suddenly asked me. "It's okay. For how long?" "What?" "You'll be out for how long?" "For 3 days." She followed with her eyes her cousin and son. "I told my brother about you. I think he likes you." We were standing in the middle of this very broad village street. I was still holding a big iron bar I was digging a hole with for our front gate column, and I was stripped to the waist wearing an old pair of my worn-out blue jeans. And she, dressed up nicely in her new pair of jog pants, sneakers, and a white t-shirt, with no bra under it, very bold of her, especially in a remote place with a predominantly Muslim population, with a light bag hanging on her shoulder. We said goodbye in a very reserved manner, and Ellie ran to catch up with the bike. They had to cover 20 more kilometers to get to that village. She promised to be in the club in 3 days and would wait for me there, sure thing. 3 fucking days. The neon light kept flashing in my head. I was desperate. I suddenly observed a woman watching me from over the top from behind her gate in the yard, with her hand covering her eyes from the sun. Here we go. There was another one watching in the same manner from the yard opposite. Fuck. I always thought that it was a siesta time. In the middle of the heat, the village seemed to be so depopulated. In these 3 days, we fixed our gate and fence, and split the logs. My childhood friend came from his work to his days off. And the next day, that very day of Ellie's arrival, my auntie from Ufa came with her niece, my sister cousin Sveta. My auntie immediately asked us if we were seeing somebody. You bet I was bragging. You have never seen anybody as beautiful as the one I'm seeing now. She was the best auntie I ever had. Well, up until she paid visits to some of our relatives. When she was back, she was really pissed off at me. She was coming like she was going to pull my thick, back then hair off my fucking head. I had to run for my life from her in circles inside our yard, exhausting her out. What the heck had I done this time, please? My crime was that I was dating a married woman with a dubious reputation. Not only that. People saw me carrying her baby in my arm. She was going to kill me good. At that moment, I remembered women peeping from behind the gates. That night, I went to the club. My Ellie was supposed to be waiting for me there. When I came, they told me that Ellie was there all right. She must have been inside right then, watching a movie. I went inside, sat down on an empty seat. I waited for my eyes to get adjusted to the darkness so I could find Ellie. And I heard the steps, high heel steps, my Ellie. Steps were coming closer. And now here comes and sits right next to me, Rosa. Fuck! Hi. She was so happy to see me. Miss me? I stood up. Where are you going? She asked, startled. I need a smoke. I just couldn't bear the sight of her. I found Ruslan in the hall and had him find Ellie for me and get her out. He was my real friend. I took Ellie to my place, and it felt good again. I was struck by Ellie's eagerness to have this out with Rosa right then. She had said this, "You're not going to see her as long as I'm around." Right after that, she, however, recollected herself and said that she wouldn't fight for a boy. Nevertheless, with Ellie around, I never saw Rosa close by. Having such a stunningly beautiful girl who was ready to fight for you was something new to me. Judging by the euphoria that I was feeling all this time while she was with me, the dopamine level in my blood was probably higher than ever. And I never had that self-confidence ever before, as I had with her around. Sveta, my cousin's sister, met Ellie and was thrilled with her. All the local young people of the village admired or envied us, the happy and relaxed ones, and I, being madly in love with her, was acting like spoiled fancy pants who, in fact, had the situation under control. That's how it looked from outside anyway. I didn't play. I lived in the image of that cool guy, and the girls started saying that I was becoming too arrogant to them all, while Ellie complained that she had few friends and kept losing them. Everything here was against her. Well, at least her ex-boyfriend had finally left her alone. He used to be all over her before I came along. Her relatives kept forcing her to marry, and now they were having a go on her for hanging around at nights. Her uncle once threatened her to get her out of his house. "You will live with me," I said casually, blowing smoke rings inside my heart. "I will have to pick up all my stuff then." She did mean that. I bit my tongue. I thought of my aunt. No, I wasn't ready for that yet. We no longer went to the club. Ellie would come to my place instead. Being with Ellie, I was getting skinny, and the guy said that I no longer looked as impressive and brutal as I used to be. But I was sure I never had been as militant as then with her around. With my testosterone level going wild, I was aggressive and ready to tear apart anyone for her. It was a shame I had never shown that as she did on me with Rosa. She was telling me a lot of her stories, like when she was a cause of severe fights at discos in Dushan Bay. One day she was hiding from her drunken boyfriend who, in a fit of jealousy, threatened to kill her and furiously drove a motorcycle in the search for her through the night city until he got himself killed in a crash. In the city of Ufa, after splitting up with her husband, she never used the word divorced. She was sitting all day alone in a cafe in a state of prolonged depression, where, inside the cafe, she met the metalheads gang, the aggressive young guys, the heavy metal rock music lovers. She made friends with all of them and got fascinated by the hard and heavy rock music and all these rallies and entourage like leather coats and chains. They constantly hung out in that cafe. They had the band leader called Redhead, her no boyfriend now. Then her Ufa relatives had her go here to the village. I knew she was holding something back on me, but I didn't want to know too much about her past. I was in love with her too much to want to know too much about her. In a week or two, we realized that we missed the river. We never went there since our last time. We fixed these right for the next day. We went down there that very night, though. That's how it worked there. We got out to the street from our den. The night was still young and it was still busy out there. An accordion played somewhere across the street. Somebody whistled at the other end of the street along with the echoing laughter. And on our gate's bench there probably was half of our street's population. The crowd was passing around a large bottle of a scented meat, each taking a good pull from it. That was Azad who had stolen it from his paternal apiary store. It was a real environmentally friendly belly wash we liked for the occasions like this. I and Ellie had a good pull each as well. Then I saw my little cousin Sis in the crowd and was about to chase her home. Wasn't she too young to drink the mead yet? I was still responsible for her. She said it was too late, she'd already had it. And Azad asked me not to send her home, please. I could trust him. We were good childhood friends after all. Okay, I said, as long as he was going to stake his life on her. 3 years later, they, Azad and Sveta, got married. The night was fabulous. The moon was huge and bright. Here came Fail, the Gazmanov singer guy, riding a horse harnessed to a cart full of hay that never made its destiny, along with whooping guys and laughing girls. "Where are you up to?" I asked him. "To the Dama River. Here we go." The idea to go there right then, well after midnight, sounded good indeed. The crowd set out to the river. On the way there we got stretched out and broke into small groups and couples. I and Ellie found ourselves in the middle of a lonely track, lost in an uncut meadow under the bright moonlight. The village was far behind now, almost as far to the river yet, with barely audible distant voices. I was about to start kissing Ellie when we suddenly heard a distinct grunt in a bush ahead of us. I froze and Ellie almost fainted first, but right there she suggested that it was someone playing tricks on us, and I decisively moved to the sound. Of course, it was them. Azad and Sveta squatting in the bush, they laughed happily with the effects they had on us. I chased Azad, fooling around a little bit. Finally, we all four made it to the river. Derma River looked beautiful, shimmering with the reflected moonlight and mysteriously black forest on the height of the opposite bank. We all wanted to swim. The problem was that neither Ellie nor I had any swimming gears. Each solved the problem in its own way. I announced I'd swim naked and immediately got undressed. Oh, he did that. Sweater turned away, spluttering and chuckling, and ran and jumped into the water. Fuck, it was good. Swimming at night in the river like this. Ellie had jumped after me with her blouse on. She put her clothes neatly folded on the grass. Quite a different story was with Azat and Sveta. They had their swimwear on them all right. All four of us were noisily tumbling about in the river. Azat took an empty bottle and swam to the middle of the river and ducked under with it. He, being a local village boy, knew all the water springs coming out at the bottom of the river, so he filled up the bottle at the bottom of the river with incredibly cold and tasty water. Exhausted, we got to the shore. Laughing, Ellie said that I, being naked in the light of the moon, looked like I was wearing a nice white bathing suit. Good effect of my approach was that I had dry clothes on me when I got dressed. I gave Ellie my sweatpants to wear so she could keep her clothes dry out of her wet body. Soon Fail showed up with his cart full of young people making a din with the restless accordion player. Ruslan was with them all right. Judging by the fun they were having, they must have passed around quite a few more bottles of meat on the way here. We took some pictures, danced to the accordion, and fooled around. The poor horse took us all back to the village. We kept riding through the village, and Ellie watched Fail to be easy with her horse all along. Then, early in the morning, Fail each and everybody delivered home. Ellie went home in my pants. We agreed to go to the river the next day to the same place, just the two of us. If I only knew that was it. That was our last night. Someone was calling me out in a drawling manner in my dream. I jumped up at Ruslan's strong kick in my side. Are you fucking crazy? I was on him and he pointed. Look who is here. That was Ellie calling me out in the courtyard. It was still early in the morning. The sun had not risen yet. I came out to her. I'm living with my mother. I came running all the way through to say goodbye to you and get this back to you. She handed me the package with my sweatwear. To say goodbye, you say? I felt sick. Not again. I'll be back in a week, but you will not be here, I know. That was true. Our vacation was coming to an end. Whenever I think of that moment, I will kick myself. I would never forgive myself for how I was saying goodbye to her, to my most beloved woman, as it has turned up until I met Irka. I must have been half awake. I slept no more than 3-4 hours a day on that vacation, I reckon. And now Ellie was standing next to me, having just run across half of the vast village and calling out for me, and I could not wake up, just moaned in response until Ruslan gave me a good kick in my stomach to animate me a bit. And me, who still didn't seem to understand what was going on. I would have been hurt if someone had said goodbye to me the way I was saying to her. I sat in front of her. I was lost, and Ellie, as usual, was gorgeous, looked fresh and beautiful. Just out of the bandbox in her pink trousers and a white shirt. I was silent, resentful because Ellie was leaving me. After a very long and inhospitable pause from my side, Ellie had offered to exchange our dresses. There was no pen around, and I wouldn't go inside the house. I wouldn't want to wake my grandmother up to have her open the door for me at this ungodly hour. Maybe I'll see you someday, said Ellie, leaving. I said nothing. Depressed, I climbed back into the hut, and Ruslan, who had not slept, began to urge me to go and catch her up and give her my postal address at least. If I were you, I would have caught her up and asked her to marry me. What a fucking idiot you are. We both indeed were in love with her, and I came to a fucking screeching halt. I was an idiot. It all was too much for me to handle. This love must have played tricks on me. I stayed lying inside the hut, all sick and freaked out. I then left my postal address for Ellie to write to me. I had an asseveration from my sweater that she would pass it to her. She never did. And how I waited for a letter from her. And what a letter I have prepared for her, waiting on its wings and never taking off. And those beautiful pictures she has never received. If I had received a short line from her, I swear she would become my wife. My mom, by Alice's pictures, immediately figured out whose daughter she in fact was, and she wouldn't mind me marrying her. After this affair with Ellie, we both, me and Ruslan, have become completely different persons. Ruslan, by the way, had no affair with any other village girls on that vacation. I don't know why exactly, but right after the vacation, Ruslan had gotten very sick and got himself hospitalized and stayed there nearly for a month. And I had a very strong immunity against any diseases and love as well. At that time, I met student girls from Leningrad who came to our region with the student construction crew in the summer. We had some good times, but there was no love, no sex, just friendly relations. After Ellie, I swear to God, I had no attraction to any woman for maybe 7 or more months. At the same time, after Ellie, I had that absolute confidence in myself. Now I knew that everything was possible for me. Ruslan, on the other hand, had lost such a self-confidence of his he always had. He lost it for good, as it had turned out. For a very long time after Ellie, I still kept comparing my other girlfriends with her with the same summary. Ellie was still better, and Ruslan consistently and sincerely agreed. In my home room and later in the North Hostel room, I had enlarged photos of her hanging on the wall. My cousin Sveta, as I said, has never passed my address to her, although seen her all right. Later I learned that it was her inherent typical irresponsible attitude and lack of any seriousness in her. She'd never do what she was asked to. Unreliable person. Later she would seriously suffer because of that. I tried to find Ellie, or at least find out something about her whereabouts. She had gotten married and she had 3 more kids. That auntie of mine from Ufa made a considerable contribution to that we never saw each other again. She was preserving our family reputation. Ellie did not fit into her rustic, patriarchal, modest and hard-working man's woman. I don't talk with that aunt of mine I once loved. I had enough of one of her remarks. Your dad also loved to come to the village just to have fun. I was supposed to come to the village and spend my whole vacation cutting hay and digging potatoes, all in accordance with her shabby ideas on how a person should spend his holidays. Ruslan, after our vacation, tried hard to redeem himself, but I've completely lost interest in these kind of our competitions. And he, for some reason, could never redeem himself. It no longer worked for him. And if, however, he met again, he'd now hide her from me. 2 years after my departure to the north, he married a girl, and a year later he had a daughter with Down syndrome. I never believed it was his daughter. I had reasons for that, but I have never said that to him. He has made his choice. Ellie, if she remembers me at all, probably was sure I had forgotten her very next day after she left, and I have never been thinking about her. The way I had behaved with her during her saying goodbye to me. What else she could think of me carrying along like that? Ellie, my little doll. That was the shortest but strongest love I ever had in my life. It would be good for you to know that. I'm still loving you. Remember that song we used to listen to a lot.